Hello and welcome back to Autodesk Inventor Automation Academy. I'm Philip Cox, and today we are going to be talking about attributes, how to read them, how to write them, and how to make them useful, at least in some ways. There's a lot of applications of attributes, from finding things in a drawing, or in this case, we're going to talk a little bit about using them in what we like to call persistence, which means making your data after you run something on Inventor persist or stay around the next time you open it. So here we can see that we're going to be using the Nifty attribute tool by Brian Eakins to look at our attributes that we read and write through the API, just so that we can see what's going on. And we'll kind of explain a little bit about named entities, if you know what those are, and how they play with attributes, because they're secretly attributes inside the black box. So we'll look at that as well. So why don't we just dive in? We'll be using kind of a compact set of code to do writing and reading, and we'll also look at kind of what that looks like after we do those. So here, writing attributes. Let's start with that. First thing you need to know is that there are different levels of folder kind of structure in an attribute, and it might be easier to kind of show this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Inventor over. We're going to pull up Nifty attribute. And you can see we have an attribute on the assembly component definition. Attributes are organized inside these folders called attribute sets. And this one we've named KETIV attributes. And underneath that, we have two attributes, one by the name of flywheel type and another by the name of flywheel rotation, and then two different values. Okay, all of these, if I go and edit, I can come in with the Nifty attribute tool and change what they are. So if I wanted to, add text here, I could do that. I don't want to do that right now, but I could. So that's how we, how the attributes are organized. Now, let me pull Inventor back, went into hiding. Let's talk about what is the difference between named entities and attributes. So if I come in here and let's open up a part. And I want to grab this face. I want to assign an entity name. And let's say I say, we'll just call this interface for right now. You'll notice here on the entities, we get this here. I can come in and turn off the visibility so we don't get that green arrow if we don't want it. So what is this? Well, this is secretly an attribute. If we open up our tools again in our Nifty attribute, we'll notice that on that face, we have an attribute now. And we have an attribute set named iLogic Entity Name Set. And then we have two attributes on there, and one of them is iLogic Entity Name, and the value is interface. So the only thing that we add and can control when we do an entity name is that value. Everything else is set. It'll always be iLogic Entity Name Set and iLogic Entity Name. So knowing that, you can interact with the entity names or named entities that you made manually in Inventor, either through reading them or writing one to show up here programmatically. So let's look at what writing an attribute would look like. Over.
Real quick, before we keep going, I just want to see if this is useful for you. We just ask that you please like and subscribe. The feedback that you give us is very helpful when it comes to creating more content like this for teams like yours. So without further ado, let's jump back in.
Okay, so now that we've talked about kind of how they're organized, you can see we set up a string here, attribute set name, flywheel attribute name, and we have another name here. So these two are kind of same level, two different attributes. If you remember, we had two different attributes under the attribute set, KETIV attributes. And then we get our values here that we're pulling from above in the code. Um, so that those are three different levels of strings for the attribute set, the attribute set name, the attribute name, and then the attribute value. Now we need to go get the attribute set. So if we get any object really in Inventor, I guess maybe that's too broad, but most objects in Inventor, you can put an attribute set on here. So here we're going to grab the assembly component definition. You saw with the named entity that if we grabbed a face, we could put a attribute on that. You can put it on parts. You could put it on, I believe, features. But anything in the API, if you grab the object and put dot and you see attribute sets, that's good to add an attribute. So we're going to grab all the attribute sets off of the assembly component definition here. And then we're going to, here we're just checking to see if our name is used to make sure that, because if you try to add an attribute set and there's one named that already, it will crash. So we don't want to do that. So it has this nice useful property here, name is used. So if the name is used, then we're going to do something different. If it's not used, it's real simple. We're going to add the attribute set by the attribute set name we already made up here, KETIV attributes. We're going to make our type and rotation attributes here. The type one will pass in the flywheel name and the flywheel type attribute value. So that's the name here. And then the value is, whatever that it needs to be represented, whether it's a basic flywheel or a spoked flywheel or, whatever. Now you'll notice up here on these set names and the name of the attributes, I've gone ahead and commented what it would look like if you were doing your iLogic, your entity name. Okay. So there's the iLogic entity set, name set. So if you wanted to write one, you'd sub that in for our KETIV attributes. And for the two names, you'd sub this iLogic entity name. For the value, you'd put whatever you wanted the value to be, whatever you'd input in the entity name. So then let's say that a name we've already put in an attribute. Well, then, or there might be an attribute set. And if there's the set, then we need to say, hey, go grab that set, as opposed to adding one. So that's where we use the dot item as opposed to dot add. And then once we have the set, then we need to check to see if there's already a value or a attribute by the name that we've done. And so here we have our, if the attribute dot name is used and we pass in like the flywheel type or something, we can see if that's used. And if it is, we grab it by dot item and then set the value. If it isn't, we'll go ahead and add it new. So what does this do for us? Well, if I pull Inventor back over here, on a previous video, we made an application that would place a component. And normally, oh, let me get out of the parts, get back to the assembly. Normally, when we close the our UI, we lose all the input information that we put in before, and we start from scratch. So let's say, I mean, this is simple, but let's say you had a UI that had, hundreds of inputs across different tabs to place, to make an assembled your assembly configurator make you an assembly, but then you want to be able to open up and change some things on that. But you open it up and it's all set back to, square one. Well, attributes can allow you to persist that data. So when I go ahead and hit build here, and I'll pull code over here, what we're doing is we're setting the flywheel type and flywheel rotation numbers as attributes on the assembly component definition so that when we launch the UI again, we can pull those and set them equal to that. And that's going into to reading afterwards, reading the attributes. So if I switch this to Holy and 180 and hit build, it'll switch there and we can go into our attribute here and see that we've switched the attributes. Then when we come out of it and launch it again, you'll notice, oh, looks like we have a bug here that we'll need to look into, but you'll notice that it sets this to Holy here. And normally it wouldn't do that. Normally it's set to just go to, whatever the default is, which would be the first one here. Okay, let's look at the reading attributes. Okay, so reading attributes. This one, we have to go find the attribute on the component, the whatever object that we're looking for the attribute on, and see if it has the name. So first things we're looking for is that attribute set. So we grab the top level assembly because we know that's where we put it. We're going to get that set name. And here we'll keep it simple to not get confusing. We're just going to look for that flywheel one. And here, once we get the attribute sets, we're going to get that top level assembly, pull the attribute sets off of that. And then we need to for loop through those attribute sets and check if any of those sets have the same name as KETIV attributes or whatever your attribute set is named. So here we're checking is the attribute set name, attribute KETIV set name. If it is, then we need a for loop through that. And we're looking to see whether any of the attributes are named what we're looking for. So here we have our attribute name, which is going to be flywheel type. And there you, once we find that, we can grab the attribute out of there to this found flywheel attribute. And as long as we find it throughout that whole set of for loops, as long as it's not nothing, then we can set our combo box to be what it is. So we get the value out of it and we say, hey, if that value is basic, set the index of the combo box to 0. If it's spoked, set it to 1. If it's holy, set it to 2. And in that way, we preserve kind of that data, the user's selections, through attributes, and then can read them off. So now, and of course, if we don't find it, we'll set it to 0, just the basic thing, so that if you open up a new assembly and nothing's been written, you'll get kind of the default here. Okay, so let's see kind of how that looks in Inventor. So here, let's go in and we're going to kind of cheat to show what it would look like if we deleted this. So if we come in here, delete this, and now we open, previously, we would see, holy and whatever it was set to. This time comes basic because it doesn't have the attributes to read. But once we come in here and set them, once again, we just wrote those attributes. And now we can even close down, if we save this, of course, then when we open up the file again, will have all that information that it reads. So that is one way to use attributes to have some level of persistence of data in your Inventor assemblies and part files. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to pause for a moment. With all of the noise around AI in our industry, it's great that you're here to see what we can do to automate your design and process. What's important is that you not just stop here, but you also understand how important it is to organize and manage your engineering data. That's exactly what we do at KETIV. We look forward to helping you, and as a customer of Autodesk, it's your choice to choose a partner. We'd love for you to learn more at ketiv.com/automation.